Hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Viking Spin. I'm your host Jason, and just coming off the end of the Vikings-Steelers game here. The Vikings lose on the road to the Pittsburgh Steelers today uh, by the score of 26-9. The Vikings dropped to 1-1 on the season, and the Steelers improved to 2-0. The Vikings offense was just not the same today without Sam Bradford at quarterback. That was the big story heading into this game, that Bradford would be a game-time decision, as we found out late last night, and definitely changed things for the Vikings. They were never really able to get into much of a rhythm like they did with Bradford at the helm last week. Of course, Bradford was the NFC Player of the Week last week. It's tough to replace that for Case Keenum, but the Vikings tried their best there. But I did think that Pat Shurmur really didn't call that great of a game. What the Steelers were trying to do to Keenum, I would have expected more screens and maybe some more bootleg off of play action, since they were keying on Dalvin Cook early too. And you want to slow down their pass rush. Shurmur, he called a great game last week, but I just didn't really see as good a play calling this week. Understandably, you have your backup quarterback in there, but it is what it is. And perhaps Keenum, maybe not as familiar with the offense as Bradford is, wasn't able to do some of the checks at the line of scrimmage. Because that's what accounted for a lot of the big plays last week against the Saints, was Bradford was able to check into the right play for the Vikings and get them in position to take advantage of what the Saints defense was doing. Didn't really see too much of that today from Keenum. I thought the Vikings had a lot of self-inflicted wounds, especially early on in this game with penalties. One on Brian Robinson, on a fourth down that kept a Steelers drive alive, and they were able to get points later on that drive. The offensive line, there were holding penalties that negated some good plays for the Vikings. Trey Waynes struggled today. Had some pass interference calls on him. Maybe some of them were ticky-tacky that were calls against the Vikings defense today, but still Wayne's definitely not his best game. As he was he was beaten pretty routinely out there. And the Vikings did not have Tremaine Brock today. I guess he's still learning the playbook. He was healthy enough to practice all week, but he was not able to. Vikings, I guess, didn't feel comfortable enough putting him on the field yet. I was expecting him to maybe play today, get some snaps, but that did not happen. Hopefully, maybe we'll see him next week. I thought the Vikings had a bad call on that fake punt. I really didn't like that call. I wound up leading to a Steelers field goal. But it seemed like Coach Zimmer was just getting impatient with the offense, with Keenum not really able to generate much in the first half. But still, the Vikings had pulled the game. They'd gotten closer. They got that touchdown in the second half, which made it 17-9. Could have been maybe 14-9 at that point, but I guess the Vikings are just trying to make something happen there. Like you saw Jerick McKinnon too, bringing some kickoffs out of the end zone that were a little questionable. Maybe they're doing that today because they know that Keenum is not going to give them the same firepower on offense as Sam Bradford did, so they're just trying to make something happen. But all in all, I think the Vikings hung tough for a while. This is easily a game where they could have just completely packed it in and got blown out, but they tried, they battled all game, they made it a tough game for a while there through the third quarter for Pittsburgh. On the positive side, I thought Laquan Treadwell stepped up and played pretty well. Um, you know, but like I said, it just wasn't the same without Sam Bradford. You didn't see as many balls thrown to Diggs and Thielen. I think Bradford's just got better chemistry with those guys. And Keenum was late on a lot of throws where, maybe he throws it earlier, they get a bigger play, or they get a completion, and, he just doesn't have the same timing down there with the ones, because he played in preseason with, primarily the backup receivers. So I think his favorite target was Stacy Coley when, in the preseason. So he hasn't gotten a lot of reps with Diggs and Thielen. So Kai Forbath, he's perfect on field goals, but another extra point miss, that's concerning going forward. I still think he's the guy, but maybe they'd work out somebody to kind of light a fire under him, because, there's going to be times in this season we're going to have very close games, and a missed extra point could cost you a game, so he's got to get that fixed. On a positive side, no injuries today. No major injuries for the Vikings. That's good going forward, because you hope to get Sam Bradford back next week. And I don't want to get too down about today's game because, it was a non-conference game. It's on the road against Pittsburgh. A lot, stacked against the Vikings, of course, with Bradford missing this game. But it is a non-conference game, so you much rather have him miss this one, lose this one, than last week where you played the Saints, who are in your conference, and that's going to count for a lot more in terms of playoff positioning down the road. So the Vikings win the game that they needed to win, I think, in the opener, and then, this one was what it was. But if they can get Sam Bradford back next week, I think the team will be in good shape, because we've got 4 of the next 5 games going to be at home for the Vikings at US Bank Stadium. Coming up, Tampa Bay next week at home, followed by Detroit at home. Then we go at Chicago. And then you've got Baltimore and Green Bay. Just going to check here on which one comes first. Just got to bring up the schedule here just to be sure. Which one is after the Chicago game? Okay, yep, the Packers are after the Chicago game in Minnesota, and then the Vikings will be at home again the following week against the Ravens. So that's 4 out of the next 5 at home. And then actually the week after that, the last week before the bye, is in London against the Browns. Very winnable game there too. So I see 5 out of the next 6 as very winnable. If the Vikings can take 4 or 5 of those games, they'll be in pretty good shape. At the halfway point, if they can get to, at least 5-3, probably 6-2, even 7-1 would be great. But I think, we've got an opportunity here to stack up some wins going into the second half of the season, because that's when you're going to run into some more road games. But I guess I agree with the decision to sit Sam Bradford today, because you don't want to risk him getting injured long term. So, if he just misses this game today, not too big of a deal, because, let that knee rest up and heal properly, and let him get strong, so that he can, be there for you for the rest of the season, because we're going to need him, if we're going to get this done this season, to put ourselves in position to get into the playoffs and compete for a Super Bowl championship. So, but that's pretty much all I have for this. Don't want to dwell on this game too long. I'll be interested to hear what the Vikings have to say about Sam Bradford moving forward, and let's hope that he can get back quickly, and that he'll be back in time for this game next week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So thanks for tuning in again to Viking Spin. Keep updated with us throughout the week on our Twitter and Facebook. We'll have updates on the Vikings all week, and we thank you for tuning in. So long.